Hi everyone, I'm Dale Smith, aka Journo Dale, and we're here to talk about Canadian politics. All right, well, it's time to take some of your questions, and we've got our first question from Bluesky this week. And Feisty Fabulous asks, I have a question about the powers or ways in which a speaker has to enforce proper decorum. What kind of issues specific or actions are officially a problem, such as name calling, and what kind of options does the speaker have to reprimand? So issues often involve unparliamentary language, which not only includes name calling and certain lists of words which are forbidden in Parliament, like my absolute favorite unparliamentary word, blatherskite. Look it up. But it's also things like you can't call someone a liar, or you can't say that someone is lying, which is actually makes it difficult to call out a lot of the disinformation being bandied about currently. But there are ways around that. But you can't say someone is lying or a liar, because that is one of these issues. Other things like pointing out the presence or absence of someone in the chamber, you're not supposed to do that. This is one that has been a real problem lately. Anthony Rota was terrible at enforcing this. Greg Fergus is not yet very good at enforcing this one either. But those are some of the things which the speaker should be enforcing. And this is on top of just MPs who are being disruptive or heckling or so on. There's also been instances where if someone calls someone a racist and doesn't apologize, there was an incident where Jagmeet Singh did this and didn't apologize and then was ejected for the day. So those are kinds of issues that the speaker should be enforcing for. As for tools, there are generally two. One of them is to eject someone from the chamber. That's usually a tool of last resort, but most of the time speakers don't like to do that because the MP who's been ejected will then just walk out to the foyer where there are cameras waiting and then give them a sob story. Oftentimes, though, what we've seen lately is that they'll wait until after question period to get as many of their colleagues around them and have a big to-do in front of the cameras where you've got a backdrop of all your fellow MPs. We did see this again a few months ago with someone who called someone a liar, refused to apologize, was ejected. And then after question period, she went out to the cameras with all of her fellow MPs behind her and gave a sob story. The other one, and the more common one, the speaker could use is just to refuse to recognize someone. That means he just simply won't call on them to speak in the chamber, and that means that they can't participate. That's the more common one, and it's the one that can be slightly more effective because you don't have the ability to go out to the foyer afterward and say, I was kicked out, blah, blah, blah. We did actually have an instance a few months ago where I believe it was Conservative MP Mark Stroll. I think it was another case where he called someone a liar, refused to apologize. And so the speaker, who was Anthony Rota at the time, said, fine, I'm not recognizing you until you did. And it went on for weeks. And Mark Stroll didn't actually apologize until they were about to head home for the summer. So that can happen as well. That's generally the ways in which that happens. In the old days, I'm talking pre-1990s, before the speaking lists became common, it was much easier for the speaker to enforce those kinds of powers and just to be slightly more subtle about it, because he had a greater degree of discretion around, usually he, sometimes she, but there's only been one female speaker, and that was only in the 80s. But regardless, it gives them more discretion to call on people rather than have lists of who they should be calling on next. I have an aversion to the speaking list system because it's been demonstrably negative for our political system, but that's one of the ways in which the speaker could exercise more autonomy would be to not have those lists, and to have the discretion to not call on people who are disruptive, so that even if they're on the list next and he can see that they're being loud and boorish, he can simply not call on them. But because the lists make it harder to do that, that's one of the reasons why I think if we got away from the lists, we'd give the speaker more power to enforce decorum on a more regular basis. Our next question comes from Patricia Sutherland over on Twitter, who asks, member statements at the beginning of question period, what are they supposed to be, and is it what they have become? So those are supposed to be, so a while back MPs decided they wanted 15 minutes in a day to talk about good things happening in the riding, or if someone important is having a birthday, or someone important just passed away, or if there's an event in their riding that they want to draw attention to, those kinds of things. That was the point of member statements. And depending on the size of your caucus, they had some kind, parties generally have some kind of a system internally about who gets assigned those slots every day, because they're very limited. And if you've got a big caucus, then you need to make sure that people who have specific days they need to mention, as opposed to just general good tidings or about whatever is going on. This nevertheless has become a problem, because conservatives in particular, although not only conservatives, but they are some of the worst offenders, have started using these statements as a 1-minute attack on another party. We actually saw this when they were in government, actually, and they were trying to attack the Liberals. They would use their member statements to do this increasingly. When the speaker at the time said you can't use these statements to attack somebody, they tried this very clever thing about somebody is, and then they'd list these supposed sins that this somebody was doing at the very end, before, when the speaker wouldn't have time to stop them, say, and that somebody is the Liberal leader. That kind of a thing. That got old very quickly. They kind of fell away from that. But yeah, the misuse of member statements for partisan attacks has been an issue. It is mostly the last 2 or 3, just before question period starts, that are the ones that are most often abused in this particular manner, because they get a little more airtime that way, because more people are tuning in to start question period around then, because question period never starts at 2:15 like it's supposed to. So that's kind of what it's become. I do think it's a problem. I think the speaker would probably be best suited to sit down with the House leaders of the parties and say this has to stop. That's not what these this period is used for. And people are free to make statements on their social media account. They don't need to do it in the House of Commons to clip for that. So I think a crackdown needs to happen there as well. But again, that's something the speaker needs to discuss with the parties, because he also can't necessarily do it unilaterally, because then there will be too much pushback. But I think this is something that, it does need to be addressed, because it is a problem. Our last question comes from Scrappy McBuckyball, also on Twitter, who says, I thought the security clearance needed for party leaders to review top secret documents is time limited, but some journalists are claiming he has Privy Council clearance that doesn't expire. Who's right? The journalists who say that he has Privy Council clearance and therefore it doesn't expire. Your Privy Council oath is for life, and therefore it's not like a public service security clearance. Part of the oath as a Privy Councillor is that you will keep things secret that are meant to be secret. And that is really what this is based on. Yes, when somebody gets or is being nominated to cabinet, there is usually a security process that happens in the back room in PMO that says, is there something in your past that you could be blackmailed for? Is there something you need to let us know? That kind of thing. So that generally happens before someone is appointed to cabinet, and before they end up swearing that Privy Council oath. But yeah, this isn't something that expires. So the issue here is not that Pierre Poilievre can't get a security clearance because he's got it. He's sworn his Privy Council oath. That's not the issue. The issue is that he chooses not to attend these particular briefings or to see these particular documents, because if he did that, then he would need to behave in a responsible manner and be circumspect in what they say or what he can say about them, and so on. And that is not the way he likes to operate. And that's actually a long-standing problem in Canadian politics, is that MPs would rather be ignorant critics than informed observers. And there is a long list of academic research on this particular phenomenon as well. But that's really what this is about. He thinks that if he sees these documents, then he's going to be, he likes to say muzzled. It just means he would have to be responsible in the kinds of things he could say about them. So he could still talk about them. He could still say, I've seen the documents. I think the government is on the right track, or what they're saying is true, that kind of thing. Or he could say, I've seen the documents. I disagree with what they're saying. He can't, elaborate, but he can still talk in general terms about that kind of thing. But he doesn't want to do that. He wants to be able to make hyperbolic and incendiary claims, which he would be grossly irresponsible if he had seen the documents and continued to do that. And it would just pretty much demonstrate that, because he had seen the documents and he was making these claims, that he's, making them up or so on. So he doesn't want to do that. So he would rather remain in the dark so he can say whatever the hell he wants. Whereas if he had gone through the process, read the documents, had the proper briefing, he would have to behave in a responsible manner. He doesn't like to do that. He won't do that. So therefore, he doesn't get briefed and see those documents. And that's what this is really all about. It's not that he can't get clearance. He's got his he has it. He's sworn his Privy Council oath. He chooses not to. And that's everything for this week. Thank you for all your questions. Join us again next week for more Canadian politics. I'm Dale Smith. That's at journo_Dale on Twitter, and journodale _no on Bluesky. And don't forget to like the video, share, subscribe, and support us on Patreon. Thanks, everyone.